All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. You may hear a little bit of a attitude from me today in today's reporting. Please forgive me if I get a little bit passionate. Why do I say that? Because I'm just going to say right off the bat, my channel would have been nicked, completely destroyed for mentioning those labs last week, and I had to watch my words. Now all of a sudden it's okay because, Reuters and the UN is talking about it. Anyways, let's jump right into it. I promise not to waste any of your folks' time. I would also like to thank you folks for the last couple days. Usually I'm a lot more active, even on the public side of things. But I've had some, little bit of, I guess you could say, rifts within my personal schedule. But all is good now. Even for those on Patreon, we will be continuing with the members-only content either tonight or tomorrow morning, depending how much I get done today after I catch up with my notes and everything like that. So with that being said, I want to thank each and every one of you that helps provide me with research, data, you name it, for those that, come to listen to the Kraken and all that. I cannot thank you enough, whether it's, military-based or extraterrestrial-based or paranormal-based, whatever it is, science-based. I truly, truly cannot thank you guys enough. Let's jump into it. It's Friday. It's basically the weekend. Don't mean to waste your time, so let's go. The Pentagon has said, first and foremost, by the way, for those not interested in any updates pertaining to Ukraine and what have you, I'd say skip to about maybe, again, 10, 15 minutes into this Kraken. The Pentagon has said that transferring fighter jets from U.S. custody to Ukraine is not explored right now, but, quote, sovereign nations can decide for themselves, end quote. But then, shortly after that, which is why I waited a little bit in the day to sort of wait for the updated reports relative to Russia and Ukraine, because things are happening minute by minute, Biden personally banned the transfer of MiG-29 or MiG, however you like to say it, MiG-29 fighters to Ukraine, fearing to anger Putin, according to the Wall Street Journal. I'm trying to watch my words here because, again, it's also been reported that YouTube is actually going to be removing any Russian state media, so I have to, cite my sources appropriately, even though that's whatever. The next thing is that Nancy Pelosi said at a press conference, and I quote, "With this president, this Joe Biden, this president with justice, environmental justice, economic justice, so much has been accomplished," end quote. I have no idea what that's supposed to mean. Seriously, it's either she's constantly being drunk or she's control. I don't know. And I'm talking about Nancy Pelosi. These people are trying to cling on to power for way too long. They gotta go. The next thing is that the Beijing plans to retaliate with a, quote, serious response, end quote, if the U.S. slaps sanctions on China over Ukraine, according to the Chinese foreign minister spokesman Zhao Lijian, and they vowed this. So this is interesting. I don't know how much of this is a stage, so to speak, and how much of this is China really, again, watching their steps and moves very carefully on the chessboard in real time. This is what I wonder. It's too all over the place for me to make a solidified decision or a personal opinion, although I could be very wrong, which is why I don't, again, sort of like the whole situation with the labs. Just like last week, I had to watch my words, and I said, let's watch it play out, and if I'm wrong, I will totally say it, but turns out the labs are legit. So, again, let's let things play out, and let's not allow my opinion to influence you folks. Please decide for yourselves. Now, interestingly enough, I find overall in general, we're seeing the collapse of, again, I guess you could call the attempt at forming a new world order or something like this. A lot of people say it has to do with, the ET influence, and people have been saying, you have to be careful with this whole new age influence of shadow people and all of that. You have to be very vigilant. This is a final attempt by these dark esoteric entities to enter the planet as it's allegedly ascending. I don't mean to turn this into an alien episode or anything like that. I just felt the need to sort of bring that full circle because a lot of people do feel like it is correlated. So the next thing is that Extinction Rebellion eco-extremists plan to block a major UK oil refinery, multiple of them, amid the Ukraine-Russia crisis, according to kentonline.co.uk. So, again, make of that as you will. It could be possible they're being funded by some proxy agency, which is, again, either serving the West or Russia, you name it. It's hard to say. Then, or maybe even China. Again, pure speculation. The next thing is that U.S. inflation has rose to 7.9% in February and has hit a 40-year high, more than expected, and likely only a harbinger of even higher prices yet to come. Again, make of that as you will. The next thing is that the Biden administration has extended the travel mask requirement for another month through April 18th, according to the TSA.gov press statements part of their website. Again, I see this as, in my humble perspective, the Biden administration doesn't want to make it entirely seem like, the whole COVID thing is dead. So they got to, say, oh, look, we still have to be safe, even though this whole, thing going on in Ukraine is the big issue right now. So again, make of that as you will. Now, I'm this is when it gets tough, because what I'm going to continue to report now, it gets quite controversial. I'm going to do my absolute best to view both sides of this. So the next thing is that there's been an unusual amount of reports about GPS interference near Finland. The Baltic Sea region, says the Finnish Transport and Communications Agency Traficom, according to traficom.fi/en/news. Again, this could be, I'm going to be straight with you folks, could be military, reverse engineered ET tech, just full on human tech. Could be ET. Again, I would go with some type of surveillance drone of sorts. Hard to say. Again, if you take a look, for example, at our Patreon, there has been, or our Let's Get Banned series, but leading into the Patreon, there's been a lot of speculation that there's a lot of energetic occurrences going on underground, particularly within the Baltic region, and it's always been like that for quite some time. This is nothing new per se. For those that have followed the show for a while, we've touched upon the Baltic Sea region for the last year and a half as it pertains to alleged bases there, and you name it. So that is on the table as to what we could speculate that is. Now, again, most common thing, probably just super advanced military human surveillance drone, right? The next thing is that Pakistan has accused India of firing a projectile at its territory, and then there was an update shortly after where, quote, a technical malfunction, end quote, led to the accidental firing of a missile into Pakistan, the Indian Defense Ministry says. Now, again, the Pakistani government wants to meet and all this stuff, saying what the heck happened here. We got to speculate if this truly was a technical malfunction or not. My bias wants me to think it was, because, again, the concept of wanting there to be peace relative to India and Pakistan's alleged agreements and alignments, if you will. With that being said, there's a larger concern here, which is that both these countries have nukes. If this truly was an accident, I get it, accidents happen. But what if an accident, quote-unquote, happens with one of their nukes instead of a missile? It's a serious thing to be concerned about. Which, again, you can even implement the ET factor into that too, right? Again, they're very concerned, so allegedly, whether they like our species or not. The next thing is that Mark Zuckerberg's Meta platforms, Facebook and Instagram, are allowing users in some countries to call for violence against, quote, invading Russians, end quote, in the context of the Ukraine invasion. This is according to Reuters.com. YouTube should not and cannot nick me for that. So let me just say first and foremost, this is when I said controversy, this is when I think it's going to get a little controversial, and I'll tell you why. I am not saying people are not dying in Ukraine. Let me be very clear about this. But again, we have to also consider the whole concept of what Noam Chomsky, and I'm not trying to refer to him as often as I have, because, again, to be fair, my friend Tony actually brought up a great point. These intellectuals, they sit back in their nice, mansions and what have you, sip on tea and speculate and commentate. It's a very fair point, to be fair. They're not on the ground themselves, and it's something I should have considered earlier. Point being, I am of the personal opinion there is a massive campaign amongst the West and Europe to make Zelensky, President Zelensky, appear like a hero, you name it. Let me just use the words of an American colonel that appeared on Fox News, I believe a retired colonel, Fox Business, a couple days ago. These are his words, not mine. I'm inclined to agree with respects to both sides pushing some type of dissemination, however, of propaganda. But, look, this colonel comes on and he says, and again, we could argue this is anecdotal. This colonel says that everything coming out of Ukraine reported by European outlets and the Western outlets is being debunked as BS within 24 to 48 hours. He said this on Fox Business. YouTube should not nick me for this. This is right out of Fox Business. And he said he believes personally that Zelensky is not a hero. He's being used as a puppet by the West. He also believes that, Putin has made far more advancements than anyone in the West or Europe wants the average person to believe. Make of that as you will. Personally, to be fair, I do see both sides, but I can't also sit here and say that I do not see, in my humble opinion, a major propaganda campaign being issued out by the West, and that would be further justified, in my view, with Zuckerberg's Meta platforms being allowed for people in certain countries to call for violence that against the Russians with respect to the Ukraine context. That what I gather from that is the White House called Zuckerberg and said, you got to let this happen because our campaign is not working as good as we wanted. Now, that is not to say people are not dying in Ukraine. Let me also be very clear about this. But it's a tough situation when you muddy the waters with all this kind of stuff on both sides, to be fair. The next thing is that Jussie Smollett, I think, sentenced to 150 days in jail and 30 months of probation for lying to police and staging the hate crime, blaming Trump supporters. He removed his mask and turned towards the judge, repeatedly saying, quote, "I am not suicidal." Look, I would honestly look into this more. If I don't and something more comes of that statement, then I will admit that it's my fault for not delving into it. I think he just wants attention. This guy constantly wants attention. That's just my take. The next thing is that the WHO, the World Health Organization, has advised Ukraine to destroy pathogens in health labs to prevent any potential spills into the population. The World Health Organization would not say when it made the recommendation. This is according to Reuters again. You see, this whole channel would have been nicked last week for bringing this up. That's why I had to watch my words. Now all of a sudden it's okay? Huh. Speaking of which, the United Nations Security Council will convene today at Russia's request to discuss Moscow's claims of the, quote, military biological activities of the United States on the territory of Ukraine, end quote. Again, and the U.S., as we speak, I believe the UN Security Council meeting is occurring right now. The U.S. then said, quote, Ukraine does not have a biological weapons program. There are no Ukrainian biological weapons laboratories supported by the United States, end quote. Of course there aren't, but you see how they watch their words? It's obfuscation with their words. They're telling the truth, but they're also not. They're just mudding the words, folks. At the end of the day, again, it's the same thing like with... Oh, I have to be careful even saying that. It's like saying a certain prime minister was a few weeks ago, quote unquote, fact check saying that this particular prime minister, I'm not going to say who because then I'll get nicked, was owned shares in a particular company. No, the prime minister himself didn't own shares. This is what bothers me so much about these fact checkers. According to fact checkers, this is not true. Yes, in that context, it's not true. But you think that these leaders of the world are going to have personal shares under their name? They're going to do it under family members, under dummy companies, put it overseas and all that. It's a joke of a game with the words and the way they do it, folks. So again, listen to the words. Let me read that again. The U.S. said at the UN meeting right now, and I quote, Ukraine does not have a bioweapons program. No, they don't. Technically, they don't. But the DOD, maybe, hypothetically, has funded something under a classified guise, under a particular rule that also said maybe to deny if this ever came out. So again, and I continue with the quote, there are no Ukrainian biological weapons laboratories supported by the United States, end quote. No, but there may be labs for biohealth and safety. You see? But what's the difference? It's a joke, guys. Anyways, sorry for this is what I meant about getting a little passionate. This ticks me off so much. The next thing is that YouTube has now blocked all Russian state-funded media channels globally, and Russia plans to ban Instagram starting this coming Monday. Again, I believe Sunday at midnight it'll take into effect. It's unfortunate. I also checked on my own VPN, for example. To change locations just to see, and they've removed the Russia option, if I'm not mistaken. Now, there are still ways to get to it, don't get me wrong, but as it pertains to an official VPN, very marketed one, promoted one out there, They nicked it. So the next thing is that Biden says on Russia's stock market, and I quote, "You hear me? It will blow up," end quote. I'm just gonna leave that there. I watched the clip and he could play Joker in a movie with the way he said that. So the next thing is that Queen Elizabeth II will not attend service for the Commonwealth on Monday and will instead be represented by Prince Charles. It would have been her first major engagement since having COVID in February. Yeah, I think she's dead or she's moved bodies. Her soul switched bodies if she's been given that ability. That's my humble opinion. Or she was entered into, again, I know I'm going to sound crazy here, but her body was entered into and then they walked out, whatever being was in it walked out when they realized that her shell or container or her physical aspect was not holding up well. So that's just my take. I know some of you may think I'm half joking, kind of, but the joking part of it is getting less and less these days. The next thing is that in Uganda, doctors and members of parliament, MPs, unite against a bid to jail the unvaccinated. In Uganda, health experts, politicians, and human rights activists are united against a proposed law that would see unvaccinated jailed for 6 months. My humble opinion? Absolutely, this should not be put into place. Now, with that being said, I am not a resident of Uganda. To be totally fair, who am I to say? Right? But again, you folks like to hear my opinion, and I'm glad to provide it. The next thing is that Chile has sworn in its new president, Gabriel Boric, in a, quote, historic shift, end quote. Boric, elected on an ambitious social democratic agenda, will oversee a referendum on Chile's new constitution. Look, I hate to be all kumbaya, glass half full kind of guy, but let's see what happens. Honestly, guys, let's just give it a chance. Now, again, with that being said, if I look into this in more detail with respects to the political structure and influence relative to Chile, and I see anything intelligence related in there, it's like, darn it, But again, this speaks to a larger picture of, do we need to wipe the board clean in order for there to actually be peace amongst nations, right? And even then, it gets really tough, guys. It really does, from a philosophical debate or a moral debate, ethical debate. If I could give a quick little example, I was watching a show called Counterpart a little while ago, and it was basically with J.K. Simmons, and it was basically about, essentially, there was, after the Soviet Union fell, there was essentially two timelines that split because some Soviet Union scientists and German scientists made a split reality, so to speak. And basically what happened was that there were, I guess you could say, gatekeepers over these two different realities. And the gatekeepers were the scientists that created the realities. And one side made an agreement with the other side to not attack each other in their own realities or spread viruses amongst each other. And, spread viruses into each other's realities. Go figure. This was done, I think, a year or two before COVID hit the world. This was filmed. And what ended up happening was one side ended up deploying a virus into the other reality because that side's view was, well, if we're thinking of making a bioweapon, they are for sure. So we have to make one to be safe and to be ready. But again, this is that big debate. If you're truly loyal to an agreement, a moral contract or obligation, the question then becomes, even if we add this to the ET perspective, do some of these beings actually follow by do they stick to their word, or do they truly have secretive plan Bs, if you will? And again, it gets real complicated from there, but just thought I would bring that story up to give you folks some context on where my mind wanders in that regard. The next thing is that people in Croatia's capital, Zagreb, were rudely awakened to the Ukraine conflict when a military drone crashed in the city late last night. There was an explosion in the southwestern Jarun district shortly after 2300 or 2200 GMT. Residents found a crater and wreckage scattered close to student accommodation. Zagreb's mayor Tomislav Tomasevic said, quote, "It's amazing that no one was injured." Croatia's president said there was no sign the country had been targeted. Again, it could have been an accident. It could have been looking for something, maybe, again, underground of sorts. We can only speculate, folks. Unfortunately, we can only speculate. Now, okay, the final thing I want to report, just to sort of give you folks some context before heading into the weekend, and you may laugh here, but Katy Perry will no longer have to pay 2.8 million American dollars or 2.1 million European euros to a rapper who said that she stole his song on her hit Dark Horse. Marcus Gray sued Katy Perry in 2014, saying she had plagiarized an 8-note riff from his track Joyful Noise. A jury agreed and awarded him the $2.8 million payout, but a judge later overturned that verdict, saying the melody was not, quote, particularly unique or rare, end quote. Okay, I reported this right here for you folks because, and I even have it written down for those watching on YouTube in my little notes here that I highlighted, because this is exactly what's wrong with the world. Now you might be saying, Dave, what's wrong with something like this being reported? People can read what they want. Absolutely. But you know what the problem I have with this is? This is in the BBC's top 10 most read articles around the world. Now, unless the BBC put it there and just lied and said, oh, our algorithm put it there when it really didn't, just so they can get more clicks, okay. But if the algorithm put it there, my gosh, like, you see what I mean? This is exactly the type of emotional distraction that those at the top want us to have. All due respect. No disrespect to Katy Perry. She's a human being just like the rest of us, but, well, okay, allegedly. But point being, who cares? I mean, I hope people are starting to realize this is nonsense following these celebrity dramas, and this is all... I don't know, folks. Is it me, or do you folks not realize some global collapse with respects to people saying, hold on a second, these reality TV shows, these politics, it's all a theater. It's all a distraction from something that's being hidden from us in general. Actually, okay, you know what? I'm going to read something from you for you folks here to actually end this off that I put on my Telegram for those that are members on the Patreon. I'd like to read it to you guys. So let's see here. This is Jim Semivan, former CIA officer of 25 years for the CIA's clandestine operations department. And he said, and I quote, "Let's just say," he said this yesterday, regarding ET disclosure and all that, "for the sake of argument, the government has met with alien beings. How would you announce that? I think there have been. I know for a fact that there have been groups of people who discuss this with the government and have been for a while. What do we do? Do we announce this or not announce this? Only if it were true. I mean, I'm somewhat speaking hypothetically here. And the answer always comes up, no, we can't do that. People always say, oh, we're ready for it. We're ready for it. Well, maybe not. And I'm not, I'm agnostic on this issue. I mean, this is something that To the Stars Academy, let me just stop there. That's Christopher Mellon, Lou Elizondo, Tom DeLong, all that. When we first formed, we talked about this a lot. Are we going to open that box, that Pandora's box? And we've had a couple people that we were very close to in the government tell us, do you really want to open this up? Do you really want to scare kids? I mean, little kids. You have this whole system set up now with, with religious systems set up, a social network set up, and all of a sudden you're going to throw this thing into it, which is the biggest story of the millennia, and you have absolutely no way to explain it. By the way, before I go on, I just want to say that this would explain what Dr. Eric Davis meant when he said that these legislators can't quantify it, or these politicians can't quantify it on a legislative basis. Again, perfect example. If you can walk through walls with some of this tech, what are they going to do? Make a law you can't walk through walls after 7, 8 p.m. at night? They can't control it, right? And this is exactly what people like you and I would want in a peaceful manner that the ones at the top don't. Anyways, let me continue with the quote. Let me see here. And you're going to dump it into everyone's lap, and you're going to expect them to do what? Thank you and say thank you very much. I appreciate your honesty. And then everybody laughs, basically losing it, or they're going to go to their churches or synagogues and say, you know what do we do now? What do we do now? End quote. That was according to Jim Semivan. I don't particularly agree with that statement pertaining to, again, not saying Jim Semivan said people aren't ready. He said people told him from within the government that the masses aren't ready. I think enough of us are ready. And I think there is a place for religion, even after all this comes out, truth be told, in a positive way. With that being said, folks, I thought I would sort of end that off with, end that off today with a little bit of a positive note for the Kraken and all that stuff. And we will catch all of you very, very soon, whether it's for the members' content or the public content. We have a lot of exciting things coming for both of you guys on both ends within the next 24, 48, 72 hours. Cheers.